Welcome back to the Patreon board! This month I'm going to start with Arthur's request. He's the same guy who asked me to look at the rising of the shield hero, so I'm back to watching something that could be just as groan-inducing. Goblin Slayer. Originally a light novel by Kumo Kagyu and Noboru Kanatsuki, this series would receive a couple manga adaptations in monthly Big Gangan, while receiving an anime adaptation from White Fox, the same studio behind the Steins Gate series, ReZero, and even Akame ga Kill. They clearly have a knack for darker and more graphical stories, but like with Shield Hero, we get to see the problems of this show from the very first episode. And we are going through all of Season 1 today, which is only 12 episodes long, which starts with Pink Blood. Did I put in Danganronpa the animation somehow? No, it's scary foreshadowing of our main character and his dreaded title card. But we truly open at the Guild, and the 15-year-old girl we saw was a priestess named Priestess. Yeah, this series really sticks to simple names for its characters and locations. I guess it's a way to evoke that RPG feel. She's joining the guild to help people, and starts out as a porcelain-ranked adventurer. This seems like the start of a D&D campaign, because some other adventurers are inviting her to join their party. But for what quest?
Goblin Slaying.
I'm sure if you wait, there'll be other adventurers willing to take on the quest.
Oh, please. The four of us can handle a bunch of filthy goblins, no problem, can't we?
They say that now, but let's keep going. They head to the cave where the goblins are hiding. The head adventurer, who looks like a knockoff Cress Albane from Fantasia, goes on about goblins being weak and stupid. But then, when they accidentally split the party up, they get attacked by goblins. The wizard kills one, but she gets swarmed quickly. Priestess is completely useless now. Not even 7 minutes in, and already we have a TPK. I should note that while each of these characters panic or even die, the manga had the courtesy of showing us why they were adventuring in the first place. It's a way to compare these expectations versus reality. But the anime trades that in for increased graphic violence. And then there's this.
Take her! Just forget about me and run!
This is one of the problems I have with this episode, but there's more. Priestess is told to escape with the wizard, despite the wound not healing, and they run into more goblins. Before they can kill her, though, something in the dark shows up to save them. Who could that be?
I am Goblin Slayer.
Ah, title drop, yay. Being a silver rank adventurer, he has the antidote for goblin poison, but it's too late to save the wizard, and she even asks to be put out of her misery.
You might have been able to get her out of here and save her!
She would have suffered more.
So, unlike Naofumi, Goblin Slayer is just cold-hearted because of his line of work. He's meant to explain how life here is nasty, brutish, and short, especially for newbie adventurers that don't plan ahead. He's also a real bigot towards the goblins, and this upsets the priestess because of his methods. More on that in a bit, but first, let's talk animation.
Follow me.
Right. Yes, sir.
He dies first!
Okay, about on par with what we saw with Shield Hero. I love the fight choreography, and the Goblin Slayer's fighting style isn't just about hacking and slashing. Some of the goblins don't really gel well in either 2D or CG, but I don't find it too bothersome. No, what really bothers me is what the Goblin Slayer has to say about the goblins.
These animals hold on to grudges for life. The survivors in the nest would learn from the mistakes of the dead and adapt. There isn't a single reason to show them mercy.
But what if there was a good goblin? They might exist!
Maybe. If you looked hard, you might be able to find one. But in the end, the only good goblins are the ones who never show their faces to the light of day.
Let me guess, he has a sad and traumatic backstory that explains why he's acting this way. But even still, this is a problem. Anyway, to wrap the episode, the priestess summarizes how the rest of the day went. They managed to free the missing village girls, which was their main objective for the quest, but because the surviving fighter adventurer was traumatized from being raped, she decides to call it quits when it comes to adventuring. But the priestess is pushing on, and she's going to be working with the title character now.
I'm killing goblins. Are you coming?
Yes!
Okay, just so that we're on the same page, let's go over how this show depicts goblins. Unlike their counterparts in Warcraft, D&D, or reincarnated slime, these goblins are more akin to the standard monsters from JRPGs. But even so, they're a bit more sapient here, if only because they are capable of torturing humans, and also... Of course, from just the first episode, we also know that there are different variants of goblins, so some of them are tougher than others, though the same could be said of any of the monsters in this world. There are mentions of dragons, manticores, I think, and even a demon lord?
Apparently a demon lord showed up. How strong are we talking? Figure I could handle a low-level one myself.
All these enemies are far deadlier than the goblins in their variants, so I honestly wonder why the show is focusing on them the most. It could be that the goblins become a real threat because people just underestimate them before it's too late. But we don't see that right now, so the title character's vendetta against them just feels misplaced. There's just a double standard I noticed in the show. Besides looking really ugly and gross and deadly in numbers, rape, or the potential for rape, gets bandied about for these monsters. This is supposed to make them out to be a special kind of evil that isn't seen in other enemies, but come on. If you think those other enemies aren't doing the same things, you're kidding yourself. What's worse is that this supposed danger is the thinnest pretext to make the Goblin Slayer into a good guy, or someone that we have to side with. And right now, I don't exactly root for him. What irks me about him the most is him going out of his way to kill more goblins than necessary. Possibly even bordering on genocidal levels. Yes, saving adventurers like in episode 1 means that some blood will be spilled, but he crosses a line when he goes after goblins that are no longer threats to him. And yes, they do try to justify that too, but even still, it just seems like we need to have a grimdark protagonist who's always right about monsters always being monsters, and there's no sympathizing because they'll just end up backstabbing you later. It just seems dime a dozen nowadays. Okay, I gone on long enough. The second episode gives us a flashback of GS's childhood, with him and his friend named Cowgirl. We learn what eventually happened with them and their home, because, shock of all shock, a horde of goblins came over and burned the village to the ground. Supposedly, only Cowgirl and Goblin Slayer survived the ordeal, and they never really recovered from it. Still, they were able to rebuild their lives somewhat. They still traveled together sometimes and do odd jobs, so even our title character isn't always thinking about goblins. Cowgirl actually shows relief when she sees that he's socializing with others. But of course, he's still rough around the edges.
The only reasons we would ever enter a nest are if there's no other way, or we're certain we can kill them all. Well done.
Some people compare this series to Berserk, another series with themes of revenge and what it can do to people. I haven't personally seen or read Berserk to know how much that stacks, though I have seen some say that Berserk manages better with how they go about things. Plus, from what I've seen, they're willing to get really creative in what the characters fight, instead of the same exact type of monster over and over while trying to get a point across. Now, about the opening for this series. Song starts out slow, but it picks up towards the end. I kinda like it. Ending song is pretty enjoyable too, even if the animation there is a lot simpler. Anyway, episode 3 gives us a brief history of the world, and how the gods decided how things will proceed through, rolling dice. I know I joked about a TPK, but this world is literally built off of D&D logic, which would make a lot of sense given how the Goblin Slayer works. Anyway, we get an actual party of adventurers who will stick around this time. We have High Elf Archer, Dwarf Shaman, and Lizard Priest. I should probably think of better names for them. These guys were looking for GS, and while they talk with him, Priestess is left alone to soak up some gossip from the patrons. That is, until Witch shows up to tell them off. She then talks about how she worked with GS before, while being really horny about it.
Your friend asked a strange favor of me. Once upon a time, his only interest is in slaying goblins. But he has been honing his blade for years now.
Not the blade you think it is! Anyway, we learn that the party wants Goblin Slayer's help in taking on the Demon Lord's army. He's obviously uninterested at first, but when they mention some goblins moving into elven lands, he changes his mind. Priestess insists on going, even if he doesn't want her to, and together they set out to find the nest. Wait a minute. When did this anime come out? 2018? Unless the moons had this color described in the light novel, I think they'd be stealing from Slightly Damned. The newcomers seem like a nice bunch. They each have different personalities while sharing a desire for adventure, which, again, feels very D&D. It's good enough to compensate for a lead character who is usually just cold and not really the cheerful type, but at least he has a fine taste for cheese.
And give it here, I'll cut it for you real good.
Nectar! This is surely the nectar of the gods!
Lovely. Pairs well with the wine.
So, I think this series might be rebounding from the doom and gloom now that we have a larger cast that could balance out the Goblin Slayer. Even his theory about where goblins came from is tame compared to his earlier stuff.
The Green Moon. That's where the goblins originated. Their green home.
Does that mean shooting stars are goblins?
I'm not sure. But that moon has no trees, grass, or water. It's a desolate place. And that makes them angry. They envy us because we have what they don't. And so they come here.
Of course, if they had a way to throw us all off by having good goblins, then this could throw a wrench in his theology. Oh, and how good is the archer with a bow? Someone rolled a nat 20. Too bad she rolled low on charisma. So now she has to be slathered with goblin blood, to hide her scent, of course.
You get used to it.
Funny. Anyway, episode 4 is about taking on the goblins in this ruin. They thought they'd run into a shaman, but instead the leader of this goblin unit is an ogre. But before we get to him, though, GS actually throws us a curveball by making us think that he's going to mercy kill this elf, but...
You must kill this monster!
I don't know what you all were expecting, but I only came here to slay goblins.
Well, as long as we have an understanding, this really motivates the archer, since she's now fighting for her own people. The priestess helps out by putting a bunch of goblins to sleep, thus making them easier to kill. But when the ogre shows up, this is what the Goblin Slayer has to say.
So you're not a goblin?
Are you being serious? He's an ogre! You've heard of them!
No.
Heh. Though at least we're getting something different for this battle, instead of just another goblin or goblin variant. Once Priestess protects the party from his large fireball ability, we see more of what the party can do. Lizard Priest can summon skeletal warriors, while Dwarf Shaman can manipulate and launch rock projectiles. The Ogre regenerates past all that damage, and he's far too strong even for Goblin Slayer. But he gets back up with a healing and stamina potion, so now he can use the magic scrolls made for him by Wizard.
This is a gate scroll. I linked it to the bottom of the sea.
Teleportation gates can be used as impromptu weapons. I better write this down for my own D&D campaign. Goblin Slayer then taunts the ogre even further.
You would use such power against mere goblins?
Yes, because goblins are far more troublesome than you.
Yeah, Pretty good line. For those who have watched anime long enough, it should come as no surprise that Priestess is now warming up to Goblin Slayer. I think it's odd, because while he is helping her, he is very brash to the point of insanity. But at least she's not a slave or anything, which is a dynamic that Naofumi and Raphtalia share. So, hooray for clearing that low bar, I guess. Still can't get over how Goblin Slayer needs to kill all goblins, because even in a case where, yes, goblin slaying is justified, it could somehow spill over into real life. As we get into episode 5, the worst of Goblin Slayer feels more distant as he's spending time with other people. He's nice enough that the other party members want to help him move away from his wishes to kill all goblins, or at least the trauma caused from them, but it's going to take a very long time to change his outlook. For now, we have a couple of adventurers who lost a sword during a quest, so GS tells them to use a club instead.
Die! Die! Die!
Priestess got promoted to an Obsidian-ranked adventurer after fighting that ogre. Goblin Slayer gets called to supervise a promotion exam involving a Rhea scout, who is revealed to have been stealing loot without sharing with the party. Guess someone be needing these rare items too much, and that pisses off the guild girl. The scout is then banned from the town guild, and... even in your imagination, you know you're screwed. Good thing we'll never see him again. We'll probably will. Oh, and we do hear from one of the guild girls about how one adventurer, Sword Maiden, was able to defeat a past demon lord. So she's one of the adventurers who went on to do great things. Anyway, episode 6, we're halfway done. We start with an anime exclusive scene of the demon lord's minions sacrificing someone. But look who shows up.
Yeah. I've been saving that line for a special occasion. What do you think?
I think a surprise attack is more effective if it's actually a surprise. Announcing your presence can be helpful, though. In this case, it drew their attention away from the captive.
This is the hero! In the light novel, she had black hair, while in the anime, it's dark red hair. Just like Urza Scarlet! She's meant to appear later, since otherwise we get back to the guild, where Goblin Slayer has taken up another job to kill goblins. What a surprise. His party agrees to go along with him, but they lay down some rules for him to follow.
There will be no water torture. Got it?
Or setting them on fire.
Or poisoning them.
No poison?
Absolutely not.
But I want to torture the goblins. Why are you all so mean? They arrive in Watertown, where they meet the now retired Sword Maiden. She's the town's archbishop now, and informs them of a string of recent murders and kidnappings. It's the goblins committing these crimes, and they're basing themselves in the sewers, so the party heads down there to flush them out. GS and company navigate the place with lanterns, but then they run into more trouble when we see the goblins with...
No!
A boat.
Oh snap, it's the Plunder Patrol! The evil variety! The fight against them is entertaining, and Dwarf Shaman sinks the boat with a giant rock. Things get out of hand when a swamp dragon wakes up from all the ruckus.
That's not a goblin.
Thank you for clearing that up!
GS eventually leads the dragon to the rest of the goblins, who naturally get their asses kicked. It seems the job is done, but he's getting the sense that the goblins are getting smarter and more numerous. What could it mean? Well, we'll have the time to figure it out. Let's start the next episode with a bath scene including Priestess and Sword Maiden. I'm surprised they're willing to censor any nudity, given how much is present in the manga, while the violence and gore is left untouched. Sword Maiden shares her past and vulnerabilities, while also telling her to prepare for the day when she stops working with the Goblin Slayer. Dude just wants to kill goblins and has little time for anything else. Speaking of Goblin Slayer, he bought a canary to use in the sewers, since it can detect poisonous gas that the goblins might use. This leads to the party finding an abandoned ruin that has unusual activity and an old painting of adventurers from the past. I do like the conversation they have about what this place might have been like.
I've heard tales of the many fearsome battles that took place in this area in the past. This painting is probably 400 or 500 years old, at least.
It adds a little bit to the world lore. Sure enough, they get caught in a trap when the room starts filling with poisonous gas. So how does GS deal with this?
Wrap this in cloth, then tie it around your face.
the piece of charcoal going to help?
It'll protect you from the poison. If you have any herbs, wrap them up with it. Be quick, or you're dead.
I do find it funny how he did this without us ever seeing his helmet off. They also seal the vents that are letting the gas in, so add that to more D&D inspired workarounds. I can see why this has its own tabletop RPG book, but now they have to fight the champion variant goblin, which isn't going to be easy.
Take down Goblin Slayer!
Say something, Orc Dog!
Well, things are actually looking bad here. However, as Priestess panics and gets bitten, GS really flies off the handle. He gets in an epic sneak attack, and this rallies the rest of the party. He then finishes off the Goblin Champion the only way he knows how.
Die like a nail hammered into a coffin!
Now, goblins, take a good look!
Sadly, while Priestess is healed, GS collapses from exhaustion. We get more of his backstory in the next episode. Specifically, after the goblin attack on his village, he was rescued by a Rhea named Burglar, who looks very goblin-like. It'd be a hell of a plot twist if the Goblin Slayer was trained by a goblin to do what he does best. But alas, instead he has to indulge Burglar and his riddles as part of his training. He even makes a Hobbit and Gollum reference with this famous quote.
What am I carrying in my pocket? Your answer?
Oh hey, for once we see adult Goblin Slayer without his helmet. We don't see his whole face, but we know he kept the same hair he had as a kid. I wonder if he has the same beautiful eyes as Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen. Also, he woke up next to the Priestess. And the reason why?
So I benefited from the miracle of resurrection by sleeping next to a virgin.
We then get a bit with Sword Maiden, who reveals her rape at the hands of goblins. Which, okay, but I really dislike how this show treats the subject matter, especially given that they opened with it episode 1. At that point, it was just shock value. Here, it's just reinforcement for earlier. Anyway, they spend part of the episode recuperating after what happened, and even Goblin Slayer has to dine with the team, and nearby you can see some Mafia guys beating up a random person. While the others scout the sewers, GS and Priestess spend time together. They shop for new weapons, repair armor, and even get some ice cream. It's honestly sweet stuff. While the Goblin Slayer is shown to care about other things besides his obsession for goblin slaying, he is the most likable here. He even thanks the Priestess for helping him despite all the baggage he's carrying. It goes some way to make up for how this series began, but we'll go over that later. Witch and her partner, Spearman, give the two some items they need to finish the sewer job. It'll come in handy since they're dealing with something else they find. A giant eyeball. Or rather a beholder, but they call it a giant eyeball. They throw some flour on it, and it ends up setting itself on fire. 3 more episodes to go! This time they check the mirror the beholder was guarding, and it points them to a goblin village. Not even going to bother asking if even one goblin is potentially good or friendly, because someone was summoning them to the sewers the whole time. As more goblins arrive, they bring down the mirror, and after that, Dwarf Shaman brings the whole ceiling down. This kills most, if not all, the remaining goblins here. GS then talks to Sword Maiden about what was going on in the sewers, and he thinks she's the one behind the recent goblin attacks. That is, she's letting the goblins do enough damage to make them a real threat. Because after all, the government won't do anything to help, and most adventurers don't see them as a problem either. Even when he figures this out, he isn't going to do anything to Sword Maiden because she's not a goblin.
If any more goblins appear, call for me. I'll kill them for you.
Even if they're in my dreams.
Yeah.
She's getting off way too easy. Episode 10 brings back more of Goblin Slayer's backstory. Turns out he had an older sister who told him to protect those weaker than him. Thankfully, he has a whole party of companions to lean on, and they're doing what they can to contain his worst tendencies. But Cowgirl does wonder what will happen when he doesn't have any goblins to kill. Episode 11 begins with reports of a large horde of goblins that may be led by a goblin lord. Goblin Slayer doesn't think he and the party can handle the problem, so he tells Cowgirl to flee. But to no one's surprise, she says no.
Yes, you might live, but you'll be dead inside. So you need to run.
I told you, I'm staying! Won't just run away knowing you're going to lose your home a second time.
This is the most danger that Goblin Slayer is in, so he decides to call for the aid from the guild. Nobody there takes him seriously at first, and even when he reports the sheer numbers heading their way, the members still demand a quest incentive in exchange for their help. GS then shows how far he'd go to secure their support.
I'll offer everything I have as a reward.
And what does that entail?
All of my belongings and everything within my discretion. My equipment, my assets, my knowledge, my time, and
even your life?
Yes.
He finally hit his limit, and he's willing to go this far to ask for help. At least he's learning something. Spearman sees his resolve and decides to join in exchange for drinks after the job is done. Helping matters is the new bounty for goblins. 1 gold coin per goblin killed.
Well, it is based on intel from a silver rank, so it's not a problem.
Of course. So yeah, the whole guild is in. Time to prepare against the Goblin Lord and his horde. Everyone is set up, and the goblins are approaching. What will happen first? Oh, that's disheartening. Thankfully, using sleep and stupor magic, the hidden adventurers manage to get back the captives. Once this happens, the other guild members then attack the goblins head on. The fighting is intense, especially since we have Heavy Warrior out in front. And it gets even more epic when the goblin riders charge in. Bring out the pikes! Gotta say, the Goblin Lord didn't expect this many adventurers here. It's going to take a lot more to... Oh, snap! And where has our hero been? He's going off on his own to fight the Lord himself! The Season 1 finale begins with a startling revelation.
How could this have happened? That horde is finished.
Well, hot damn, a talking goblin! So, according to the fan wiki, this entire excursion was supposed to happen before the Watertown arc. But since the finale needed to be more exciting, this part of the story was saved for last. Anyway, the Lord seems to have an enhanced brain, through the power of mutation, I guess. And while the two are fighting, the other adventurers finish off the remaining goblins. Needless to say, it's bloody, and kinda awesome. Even Spearman gets to show that he's just as strong as he claims to be.
Take this, you big green bastard!
Okay, you got me. Even if we're stuck with goblins most of the time, that doesn't stop the fighting from looking epic. Priestess uses a new miracle spell, which saves the Goblin Slayer from being overwhelmed. This will help him against the Goblin Lord, who proceeds to beg for mercy. And what happened with him as a child pretty much enforces what Goblin Slayer was talking about this whole time.
Like hell we're gonna believe that. A Goblin Lord? My ass.
They really want to stick to the chaotic evil thing for races, don't they? That no matter what, if you're born evil, you stay evil. Good thing this series will never cross over with reincarnated slime or whatever, because that will just turn into a bloodbath. So, shock of all shock, the title character gives a final speech to the Goblin Lord.
The disgusting little goblin. And me.
With that, the farm is saved. The hero and her party show up back in town after defeating the Demon Lord, while everyone else is partying and getting paid.
But I slayed a champion! Are you trying to tell me that's only worth 1 measly coin?
I'm sorry, but the reward was clearly 1 coin per goblin. We didn't specify between the different types.
Okay, most of them get paid well, and Goblin Slayer is starting to have some clarity on what he should be doing, which is traveling the world as an adventurer. He even willingly takes his helmet off here, which, you know, is a big deal. Still can't see his eyes, but we see his smile. So, I'm not gonna lie, I enjoyed this more than I thought I would. While the first episode stoops really low, at least we see some growing up on the part of the title character. Goblin Slayer starts out completely cold and seemingly uncaring of others, but the rest of the party has grown on him over time. His obsession with goblin genocide remains, but everyone knew that changing him would take a long time. I do appreciate his wit and cunning, so he's easier to root for than the shield hero, though that's a low bar to clear. The fights in this are at least engaging, and a lot of the time, it's just the right amount of violence and gore. First episode aside, I know there's an argument for not letting one bad moment overshadow the rest of the product, but there's a reason why fans continue to bring up the rape scene to this day, or the other questionable material regarding goblin genocide, because it just comes off as a cheap way to add shock value and show how evil the goblins are. And that's on the writers to handle the subject matter better. I could return to the series if we see more from the beast races, because I know there's more than just the one lizard priest, and that's not gonna be enough. At least it's not as infuriating as the rising of the shield hero, though there's always the chance of the Goblin Slayer becoming more unlikable. Next time, though, we do the last of the 2D Swan Princess films. I'll see you then.